the world we live in today, there are simple, concrete, satisfying solutions to every problem we face. Unfortunately, by and large, they don't work and they exacerbate the problem. I want to give you an example. I want to talk to you about the social dynamic of my local food bank, the Tolleson Food Bank, which is an interactive process of structuring, balancing, respecting, and participating in economic commonality, political commonality, and cultural commonality. That is to say, if you walk into the Tolleson Food Bank, what you walk into is a web of connected interrelationships that bounce back and forth with one another as complicatedly as any ecosystem in a tree. I want to just share with you this model of the social process that begins to draw together some of those dynamics and processes and relationships that are operating to help you see how this can allow you to break open, unfold, and be more effective and more effectively responsible in your engagement in today's world. So the Tolleson Food Bank. Tolleson is a town of about 5,000 people. 15 years ago, my neighbor Lucy started the food bank, and it really was started out of a concern, if you go back to the larger social process, out of a concern in terms of political commonality for corporate welfare, because in terms of primal sustenance, there were people in the church who were hungry. We're a kind of Latino community, and there have been a lot of farm laborers that are part of the town, and a lot of recent immigrants, and people were there. And the pastor of the church got concerned, got his social morality up here in final meetings and communal wisdom, and noticed that there's Russo Farms has a carrot shed on the edge of the town where they harvest carrots and sort them out and get them into bags and ship them off to market. And he noticed they had surplus outputs in terms of property claims, so he went and asked them, could we have your carrots to distribute to the people who need food here in our community? That's how it started 15 years ago. When I walked in, it was the same picture, but a whole different picture. And I just want to talk a little bit about the economic commonality that's swirling around and going on at our food bank. As I mentioned, our main common resource, a natural resource, really is the surplus outputs now from several nearby warehouses and food-related industries. Plus, of course, we get bags of food, cans and stuff like that from individuals or food drives and so forth. So that's kind of our natural resources. It really comes out of ecological flows because for the most part it's fruits and vegetables, canned goods, it's food-related, and a lot of it is produce. As we bring in newer volunteers and new people come in, there seems more and more of a concern that we understand in terms of the mineral and nutritional content of the food, which gets kind of more into basic reserves. Our human resources, well, I'm Lucy's neighbor, so I got roped in. There's other people from the community, members of the church, and old friends of Lucy's. Labor divisions, a lot of us are just available to volunteer and give time, but we also have certain people who are allowed to work in the kitchen, certain people who focus on the warehouse, certain people who have the ability to drive the trucks and stuff. And employable skills is an important aspect of that. So we've always got to find 2 or 3 people who can drive the big truck who've got a commercial driver's license, most of whom are commercial drivers, and if they're still employed, they're too busy. Or if they're no longer employed, it's because they didn't want to be truck drivers anymore. That's the main skill, but we also, we've had to expand our capacity in terms of finding people who are bilingual, because we're getting more and more people who are Spanish-only speakers, and that becomes a significant. In terms of technological resources, not so much. I guess our innovative means An example there, we found out one volunteer has a family business in which they end up with empty 50-gallon blue plastic drums. So we got her to donate some of those plastic drums for us so we could leave them at the food warehouses to get their broken products and goods and stuff like that. The production dynamic, to say the least, is chaotic. We've got half of the church building, which itself is an old food warehouse. We've got half of the church building. We've got a truck. We've got a forklift. We've got a warehouse. We've got a pickup truck. We've got a, what do you call those things? Pallet jack. That's all a part of our capital goods, and we're always wishing we had more, especially refrigerated. So suitable tools. We have, to be honest, we have donated brooms, we have donated squeegees, we have donated rags, we have donated dishes, we have donated pots, we have donated pans, we have donated tables, we have, but they're suitable, they fit. In terms of our industrial processes, it kind of catch as catch can that we draw on. We've got our founder, Lucy, who still comes around and is well tutored in the processes we started off with in terms of unloading trucks and stuff. And we've got people from the food services industry who are trying to get us to act more like a warehouse or a real food business ought to operate. In terms of production forces, I'm common laborers, and we get a lot of people in on community service. During vacation times, we get high school students in to come and deal with us. We also, as I mentioned, we have skilled specialists come in, so Ray shows up to drive the truck, and he's a big help when he comes in, and off he goes. Staff supervisors, well, everybody kind of plays that role, and it depends sometimes who has the loudest voice to keep things focused. In terms of our production systems, we've got 3 or 4 different assembly schemes. We've got an assembly scheme for unloading a truck. We've got an assembly scheme for preparing food boxes. We've got an assembly scheme for organizing to sell discount sales on Tuesdays, and we've got an assembly scheme to put together emergency food boxes. And I suppose you'd have to say we've got an assembly scheme for how to respond when somebody calls with a semi-truck full of watermelons or whatever they might, so we know how to deal with that. Management patterns. Well, now we have a named manager after 15 years and an assistant manager, but pretty much anybody who's been there feels free to manage as they would like. Anybody who's new kind of stands and waits for somebody to say, come and help me. Allocation designs, I suppose that's shouting. Dan, get somebody over here. You, why are you doing that? Come here. Something like that. It's a little unsophisticated, but it works. In terms of common distribution, well, there's property claims. So this is, how do I say this? This is the food bank giving back to the people who made this possible to function. Exchange mechanisms, this has to do with us passing out and passing on food to the broader community. Consumption plans has to do with trying to keep some balance between those two. We struggle a lot in terms of property claims because on the one side, we're all volunteers and we're doing it for nothing. On the other side, gee, those mushrooms look good and we got a lot of them. I wonder if I could take some home. So that's always a kind of a balance. In terms of production means, we feel kind of an obligation to the church to generate enough activity so that as the food bank, we end up paying the utility bill, not only for our use, but for the church's use of electricity and water and so forth and so on. And sometimes we have surplus outputs. We just get so much lettuce in, or peaches, or watermelons, that it's more than we can use, and in that case we put them on the street, or, and I forgot all about this, we also have 5 ministries that come on Wednesdays and Fridays, who have their own who have their own food programs. And so our responsibility there is to provide them with a pallet of food that they can take to their own ministry to be shared. We do focus on exchange mechanisms as opposed to, if you will, more government-related food banks where the concern is to check people's identification and make sure they're worthy and they don't come in and get extra. In our food bank, we just ask for a donation of $5 for a food box. If somebody says, I don't have $5, they get a food box. If they come back the next week and say they don't have $5, we have them have a little conversation with the minister to see if there might be something they could do to get back into some sort of a livelihood, get some sort of a job where they can get back with some income. So we're trying to support the notion that people contribute. Or we ask them, why don't you come and work for a couple hours in exchange for that? So there's also services exchanges, and there are a couple of recovery programs and community service programs where people and participants in those programs come and work with us while they're getting themselves back on their feet from different kinds of addictions or just getting out of jail or something like that. They get themselves back on their feet, get into how you work and how you function with people, and then able to move on and get back into life. Credit exchange is not much, though now I notice we have had to find somebody with a telephone so that we can take credit cards. Consumption plans, we really function a lot on current demands. That is, most of the stuff we get in needs to get out right away. The vegetables and fruits and stuff that comes in is really coming in from a warehouse because they've decided it's not going to last long enough to get into the grocery store and get sold. So there's kind of an urgency always around current demands. At the same time, with our freezer and our warehouse, we have capacity for anticipated needs. So we'll stockpile candy before Halloween. We're already getting eggnog in, and it's October, but we'll kind of hold on to that. If the date's far enough ahead, we'll hold on to that because we'll know people are going to be more interested in eggnog when it comes to the holidays. Inclusive equilibriums, not really. Now, if you ask somebody in the food bank informally, what's the major problem? The basic answer you're going to get is the problem is the name of somebody who's not here right now. So if Francis isn't here, it's Francis's problem. If Jim's not here, it's Jim is the problem. If Dan, the manager's not here, then Dan is the problem. Which is interesting to people and kind of satisfying in a way, but it's wrong. Because we're not just a bunch of isolated people. We're this network of connections and relationships.